Welcome so much to our exclusive Twitter Space event. My name is Contessa Cooper, and I am your host for today's enlightening session. For those of you who may not know me, I am the Community Engagement Manager here at Thallo, a climate tech company who is passionate about the fight against greenwashing and committed to creating a sustainable future. At Thallo, we believe it is important to help businesses understand and adapt to crucial environmental regulations like the new EU Green Claims Directive in order to help you meet your sustainability goals while ensuring transparency and credibility in your green claims. It is a challenging task, but an essential one for building a more sustainable and trustworthy business environment. Today, I have like one of the most amazing people here at that. I just love seeing his face. Anytime I get a chance to speak with him one on one, all I do is laugh. Such a joy to be around. No, Joseph, which do you prefer?
Joe,
Oh,
please.
Joe is
Joe.
going to be leading this conversation and decoding the complexities of the EU Green Claims Directive and greenwashing. And I'm going to sit back and listen and learn. But first off, introduce yourself. Let everyone knows what it is that you do here at Thallo. Like I know you wear many hats, but what is officially that you do, and why is this so important to you?
Well, that's the great thing about Thallo. We all get to do a little bit as the size of the business. But nice to meet everyone. My name's Joe. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Thallo. My role is twofold specifically. Firstly, to ensure the direction of the company and the products that we're building align with what the market and our customers actually need. And then on top of that, manage the kind of strategic relationships that support sellers' efforts in the wider market and again, align with our products. My background is in sustainability. I'm the green hat in our tech-based organization, along with a couple of others, Contessa being one of them, and Haley, of course. I started off my sustainability career roughly about 10 years ago, following a postgraduate at Leeds University, the best university in the UK, a hill that I'll die on. I went into carbon accounting for multinational organizations as part of an EU directive. I then moved on to onshore wind and solar implementation and financing, and then most latterly was in consultancy, where I was helping some of the largest organizations in the world identify and implement practical ways to achieving net zero. And for one of those organizations, they asked me to do a deep dive into the carbon markets. This was 2019, roughly, and very quickly realized how fragmented, inefficient, and ultimately how poorly it was serving the global south, where, as we know, most of the project developers based, and thought we could do something about it with the help of blockchain technology. And therefore spoke to Ryan and Adam, our other two co-founders, and here we are 18 months later, helping to make that change happen with the help of the fantastic Contessa getting our message out there. So that's a brief introduction. Contessa, do you want me to dive straight into the EU green claims?
First of all, I wanna know why are you so passionate about this? Because when I was, like, talking to Haley and talking about greenwashing, like, you have to talk to Joe. Like, he is the person that can talk about this and explain this better than anyone else. Why you?
I think it's my background. So in terms of why so engaged in sustainability, I'm fortunate enough to come from a very sustainability focused industry. My dad ran his own sustainable consultancy, which kind of pulled me in. And then my grandparents were both green fingers and, in fact, got involved in some of the early environmental protests many, many years ago. So I've kind of had it embedded into me. I went straight into university to get into sustainability, and I've been lucky enough to have quite a varied and exciting career in the space that has helped me some really, really interesting, passionate people who are trying to solve the biggest problem that we have in on the planet right now. And it's not just about the environment. Of course, that's a critical thing, but it's about biodiversity. It's about people. But the problem is with climate change that as it gets worse and it's happening very quickly, it's those that are already most disadvantaged that are going to suffer the brunt of it. And I'm acutely passionate about slowing it down to the point where technology can really reverse it. And the carbon markets are absolutely critical in that. Why I'm best to speak about EU green claims directives. It doesn't sound very exciting or sexy, but I've done a lot of work in the past getting to know these different legislations and so forth in my consultancy career, but also because I think it is going to impact the carbon markets. And I think carbon markets, from a blockchain perspective, will make this whole process quite a bit easier and more affordable for those that are engaging in the green claims initiatives for their organizations, which I'm sure we'll get onto shortly.
I love I know that about you now that you just come from, a supportive and a supportive environment, that it was just only natural that this is where you could be this day. Oh, that just gives me like warm fuzzies. So now, like, let's get into what is the new EU's laws? What is directive? Explain it like I'm five. Let's hear everyone is clear about what it is that we're talking about today.
Sure thing. Okay, so where to start? Firstly, what is a green claim? I guess that's the first thing we've got to kind of define here. A green claim is a claim by an organization that their product or service has some sort of environmental attribute or benefit that, of course, makes it more desirable for consumers to purchase or to use their services. Some examples of that could be my product is carbon neutral, my product is made entirely out of recycled plastics, CO2 emissions for the business have halved, these kind of things that are quite broad and ultimately quite hard to qualify, but they sound great, right? I mean, sounds fantastic. The product is carbon neutral. Well, unfortunately, that is incorrect. The EU has done quite a bit of research on many of these green claims, and half of all green labels offer weak, I would say, or non-existent verification. 40% of the claims have no supporting evidence whatsoever, and 53 or 54% of the claims give misleading or unfounded information as a basis for the evidence that they supplied. So it's a bit of a problem. It's something that needs to be sorted out. And this is where the EU Green Claims Directive comes in. It's an initiative by the EU, basically to help protect consumers from the aforementioned skullduggery that goes on in the markets by laying down some kind of detailed rules on how to communicate it, how to verify the claims, and also how to report on these claims that are used pretty synonymously in many, many different markets and many different products. The reporting that the organizations will do will be audited by third parties, so external consultants or verification bodies, and will be loosely standardized against kind of scientific processes. What it does is it ties into broader EU consumer protection laws to tackle unfair commercial practices that mislead consumers away from sustainable consumption choices. But I guess the question there, why does the EU care? Why do they care if the consumers are being misled, if the sustainability claims don't really add up? Well, the EU takes the position that consumers are absolutely vital in accelerating our path to net zero. They believe that ensuring buyers have access to reliable, comparable, and verifiable data will enable them to make better choices. And in turn, because those choices that they make are most likely to be towards more sustainable products, other companies will be influenced to take more sustainable action. So it really is a grounds up approach, which I really, really like, especially we look at consumer behaviors in the carbon market. If we can get some of these or many of these products to engage with the carbon markets, potentially wrap their products in carbon, making them carbon neutral, it opens up brand new markets that I think are very, very exciting. Another key objective from the Green Claims Directive is to tackle and reduce the risk of organizations being able to greenwash. In short, that means making claims without making the impact, but we can dive into that in a bit more detail later. And ultimately, how will this look in practice? Well, that's an analogy that I can think of, and I don't know how applicable this is to the US or other parts of Europe or anywhere else in the world. So apologies if this is a very UK centric example, but I'll do my best to describe it. Um, in the UK, all packaged food, so think like your sandwiches in Tesco, again, that's a very UK thing, or Walmart in the US, I don't know, or microwavable meals, whatever they may be, all have labels on them. And these labels will break down things like sugar, saturated fats, your salts, like all the bad things that you need to be careful of in your diet. And if that product has high amounts of any of those particular things, fat, sugars, whatever, then the labels will be bright red. Comparatively, if they have low levels of those things, then it'll be bright green. And so when you're going to get your lunch, you can very quickly make educated decisions on what you're purchasing in relation to your diet. Something similar could, and it's still to be decided, could happen with green claims. So imagine clear labeling on the scores, whether it's reduced plastics or whatever the claim may be, that makes it very easy to see the impact of the product. And in the same way that I will try, depending on how stressed I am, to go for the healthy option rather than the unhealthy option, I would always take the more environmentally friendly product versus a similar product that has poor environmental impact. And I'd like to think most people would do the same, especially in this market. So, sorry, to kind of wrap up this rather long introduction on the Environmental Green Claims Directive, I think it's important to relate it back to what Thallo does, why probably many of the listeners are here, and that's the carbon markets, of course, blockchain. For the carbon perspective, what we anticipate is that once it's enacted and rolled out in significant, well, in all the EU countries, it will result in an increased demand for carbon credits. Because once you have transparent and auditable data on the product's impact, organizations that fall foul of the agreed standards will have to up their game. And to my earlier point, those that have poorer results to their competitors will also have to kind of step up to the mark. Now, many of the products that have these claims, as we know from those pretty shocking stats earlier on, are nowhere near meeting what they need to do. So there's a big gap for the carbon markets to fill there, and to engage with organizations to kind of align on, or at least get accurate and carbon credits that align with their particular claims. On the blockchain piece, because of the third party auditing, there's going to be an increased demand for easy and accessible data and, importantly, verification. If you're an organization that's going through the trouble of bringing your product to a high standard, what you want to do is reduce the costs of actually having a third party go and audit. Now, that can be done through using clear, verifiable, and immutable information on your carbon claims and retirements. And of course, that could be found on chain, and more importantly, through Thallo. So if there's any product managers listening, you know who to speak to.
So I have questions. This sounds like a really great directive for the environment, for the consumer, but there seems to be some sort of, I don't want to say backlash, But how difficult or what kind of changes are business gonna have to make when we decide that, yes, this is direction that we're taking, we're gonna have clearer labels, we're gonna make sure that there's transparency, we're shutting down on greenwashing. What are some of the problems, some of the challenges that businesses might face?
Sure. So it kind of depends where you're starting from, doesn't it? If you're a good, I don't know, for want of a better word, if you're accurately reporting and aligning with the claims that you make, then the chances are you're not going to have to do too much. Now, if you aren't very close to what those claims are, and that's not necessarily to say that the organization has done this on purpose. It might just not have the right guidance, or it might not have the right in-house capabilities to measure things effectively. Then there's going to be an element of change that will have to happen in order to maintain the claims, or I mean, you may have to adjust them. Basically, what they'll have to do is do what the EU directives suggest. It's audit your claim. So undertake a gap analysis. This is what we are saying that our product aligns with, and then identify where those gaps are. So if it's okay, this isn't a carbon neutral product, we're actually 30% of the way off, we'll either have to adjust the claim so that it's accurate, or reduce the environmental impact in the development of the product, and or offset through carbon emissions. So that's going to be a bit of a change for these organizations that aren't meeting the standards already.
So, as someone who is kind of heading the sustainability efforts in their own company, what are some of the things that you might suggest for them so that this can be easier for them as they are transitioning?
The key thing is to get ahead of these claims coming into the directive coming into action. So one important thing to note is that the various countries within the EU will issue the directives as they see fit, and that will mean penalties, but also how quickly companies need to get up to speed. What I always recommend is be early. Don't leave things to the last minute, because there will be a kind of deadline. And oftentimes, I've experienced it many times over. If you leave it to the last minute, you're going to get a poor quality of service. The best thing to do is kind of, as I mentioned there, understand what you're claiming against, what these claims are, undertake a gap analysis, and then identify where the gaps are and how you can look to reduce those gaps. Of course, a lot of that can be done by quite clever accounting that we can support with. If there's any organizations that are stuck with that, then please reach out. We can do a lot of the product and organization accounting services, so looking at the carbon impact in particular. But my key advice is just to make sure that you're being proactive on getting things in line early on.
Now, you mentioned scientific evidence. You're looking for when you're making these green claims. Can you give more examples of like what type of scientific evidence?
Yeah, so the guidance, the directive itself is pretty broad, because there's, I think, 250 something in that region, different labels. And so they're not being too prescriptive on each of the different labels, but they do give some kind of broad recommendations. Firstly, that the audits and the data that you're collecting is recognized against scientific evidence that follow particular guidelines. The recommendation is EN19EN, which is a particular guideline for getting the right data. What it has to do is identify and demonstrate the impacts that the product development is having, and the performance from an entire life cycle perspective. So from the point of development through to the sale, it needs to take into account the different impacts, not just from a carbon perspective, but also they do like that they recommend looking at all SDGs as well. And then all finally kind of where and how you're accounting for these different aspects, whether it's plastic numbers or carbon or GHG emissions, whatever it may be. There needs to be quite robust accounting and verification frameworks in place.
So this is one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm doing these type of Q&As or kind of these fireside chats. What questions should I be asking you that I haven't asked you yet?
I guess one of the big ones is around greenwashing, because that can be a tricky thing to get your head around. Like, what is greenwashing and why is it problematic for both consumers and businesses? I'm happy to go into
Please,
that.
let's do it.
The way I like to describe it, and to try and put as much emphasis as possible, is close your eyes now and imagine you're walking through your favorite bit of woodland or forest or by your river. You're surrounded by beautiful trees and an abundance of wildlife. You're just in a very, very happy and natural place. Now, imagine a company taking advantage of all of that beauty to sell you a product that they claim is benefiting that environment and is environmentally friendly. They put a few signs on the packaging, use words like natural and eco-friendly, and before you know it, you're like, yeah, this is the sustainable choice for me. But then you find out later on it's all a facade, it's a clever marketing tactic, and this is what is known as greenwashing. Ultimately, what it is, when companies create an illusion of environmental responsibility to convince you to purchase something, and they use like clever graphics and feel-good imagery, whatever it may be, but they resort to these tactics to um, engage with consumers' growing awareness of the environment and the impacts that products have on it. And so, and as consumers, we are demanding greener products. We're demanding companies that demanding companies support initiatives to achieve net zero. Greenwashing generally just seriously undermines genuine efforts to protect our environment. And this is exactly why the EU is bringing forth these directives to tackle these greenwashing claims. So once things are accounted for, once things are audited by third parties, once things are transparent and public, then consumers can make very, very, very clear and accurate purchasing choices that are protected from greenwashing.
I know probably about a month ago, I was trying to determine what were actually from like a sustainable company, had, sustainable practices and things like that. And I found it very difficult to even figure out where like my pears came from to see if this is something that I should be, investing my time and my money in. And so I find it that I'm struggling as a consumer to even know what are more green products, what are sustainable companies, and I find it really frustrating. So
Totally
what
with
can I
you.
do as a consumer?
Well, right now it's quite tricky. It's very hard to kind of sift through what is real and what is not. And again, it's a problem with the markets in general. This greenwashing is something that happens everywhere. If you've got the time, I would recommend, and it also does depend on the company size, but have a look at their environmental reports. I always say, whenever I suggest this, I say, pick your three favorite companies and look to see if they've got an environmental report. If they haven't, it's a bit of a red flag. If they do, give it a read and see if the things that they are claiming to do when you purchase, or you think they do at least when you're purchasing their products, is actually what's happening. Because when it's public data, then they have to be accurate and transparent about it. But ultimately, I guess we're going to have to wait a little bit for these EU directives to come into force. And at that point, it will be very, very easy from even a small product perspective to identify whether it's something that you're comfortable buying based on its sustainability criteria. Otherwise, yeah, I just recommend picking your top 3 to 5 companies, have a read of their environmental report, and it'll either make you want to buy more from them or find an alternative.
Now you gave some examples of some bad practices. What are some good practices that some companies have in making green claims? Like, if you're gonna put, like, a bad practice and a good practice side by side, how can I tell the difference?
Okay, so I'm not going to name any names of organizations, but what is good practice and what is bad practice? Firstly, it comes down to transparency. If the organization is being open and transparent on where they have problems, not just where they're doing the good things, I think that is a very, very, very good step in the right direction. That doesn't happen very often, but it shows accountability. It shows you can almost track their progress against where they see they're having the most negative effect on the environment or any SDG for that matter. So transparency is there, is the first thing that we should be looking out for. The second thing is how they have come to these figures, how they've reached this data, is looking at the scientific rigor behind these claims. Because it's all right saying, oh, everything we do is transparent, but if, I don't know, a 7-year-old in the back is just putting some numbers on a piece of paper, then it doesn't really have much value in terms of the environmental impact and the progress that they're making. So a really good thing to do there is look at benchmarks. If there's other organizations of similar size and in similar industry, how are they performing? If one is performing wildly better or wildly worse, then you can kind of use that as a litmus test to see how accurate the claims are. Finally, and this is something that I think is really important and quite an easy thing to check. Do they have someone in a position at C-level or otherwise, someone, a decision maker that has sustainability clearly in their role profile? If they do, great. That's fantastic. It means someone is spending time out of their working day to ensure that the organization is moving towards a net zero future. If you can't find anyone, again, it might just be a bit of, even if there are transparent claims, it's hard to distinguish whether or not it just raises a yellow flag, put it that way. So yeah, they're the three things that I would say key identifiers of good organizations and potentially bad ones if they don't tick any of those boxes.
Thank you so much for that. That's definitely gonna be like an audio clip. I might even make like a social media post about that because that was some really great information. Did we already talk about independent third party verifications?
We did, yeah. I mean, I kind of covered that at the beginning. Ultimately, what it means is that any claims that you make will be audited. There's going to be third parties that will come and look at whatever data that you have put forward.
Mm.
And so, my advice there, make it very easy for you to keep on top of things as an organization that's making a claim, but also make it very easy for the auditor. Of course, blockchain has an impact on here, but the benefits of doing both is that it saves you money because we all know how much consultants like to charge. I'm guilty of being one of those in the past, so I'm not innocent by any stretch of the imagination. But also, it just makes things very, very easy for you as an organization to stay on top of. So, yeah, if there's any opportunity to use kind of new frontier technology to make your lives easier. I mean, Contessa, you're the AI master. I don't know, maybe there's something in there that can take a little bit of the work off. But ultimately, clear and credible accounting will just make your life a lot easier once you've identified what you need to be measuring.
I am gonna check my AI resources and see if I can come up and put that in the article that we will be posting here in the next few days about the same topic. Speaking of resources, do you have some favorites?
There's a lot of information on the EU website, and I can share that around. with you, Contessa, to maybe put in the blog post that you'll be
Awesome.
sharing after. It is very European Union legislation directive, 79 pages when it could probably be about 8. So there are some clips there, but they have done quite a good summary on their website, which I would recommend people reading if they're engaged in or planning to engage in this in any shape or form. But also, please just consider me an open resource. I love talking about sustainability. I don't love talking about EU directives, but I will do because it impacts everything that we're trying to do in the market. So please, yeah, just free to drop me a message anytime with any questions.
Awesome. So again, tell us why this is important to the work that we're doing here at Thallow.
It's absolutely, I say it's absolutely critical. It's at the minute, because the EU directives are quite slow to get off the mark, and each member state will design its own method to achieving this. It acts as it acts as another piece in what is a bloody enormous jigsaw puzzle when we're talking about saving the planet and having big environmental impacts. I think direct benefit will initially at least be quite marginal compared to things like electrification, cancelling coal, so on and so forth. But, and I kind of touched on this in the beginning, it is a very big but. I think the real power of this directive is bringing environmental claims front and center of consumer consciousness. So when you're looking at packaging, when you're looking at products, whatever it may be, you will be able to see the impact of this product. People will think twice about buying a product that has a big red sticker on it saying this is poor environmental credentials. Where does Thallow come into this? Well, Thallow has built out what we call carbon as a service, which once launched in the next couple of months, and I'm sure you will be seeing a lot more of this on Twitter over the coming weeks, will enable organizations to measure the impact of their products or services and then very easily plug into our aggregated supplies, so supply across all or most of the major registries, for you to offset your product or service at point of delivery. And that can be through a small charge to the consumer. You can absorb that in your price, whatever it may be, however you want to engage in the carbon markets. We make it incredibly easy. There's no need to have 7 or 8 different registry accounts. There's no need to really understand the depth or read loads of project design templates for reforestation projects wherever in the world. We have done all that hard work for you. We make it very easy to understand. We make it very clear about what benefits each project has. And then you can very easily associate that with your product or service or just offset as an organization. So yeah, the carbon as a service model will feed into this particular directive extremely well. And as it grows, as it booms over the coming months and years, then we anticipate will play a major role in making sure that those claims are accountable, verifiable, and trusted, making people's products that much more appealing to buy.
All right. So as we kind of wind down, I have two questions for you. The first one is I would like for you to pretend to imagine that you can see into the future 10, 20, 30 years out.
Mhm.
How do you see this impacting businesses and consumers?
Well, great question, by the way. One of Thalow's kind of core missions is to ensure that the impact, so all the negative externalities that are associated with the delivery of goods and services, are offset at point of purchase. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you purchase your shoes, when you buy a t-shirt from the shop, then at point of purchase, all of the environmental impact that has been born out of the creation of this product is already offset. Now, this EU directive is the first stepping stone in this long, long journey. But what really excites me about it is that imagine a world where consumerism and purchasing, two pretty bad things, actually, well, currently frowned upon things at least, have a direct impact in saving the planet. So you buy a t-shirt and a point of purchase, you are passively investing in a reforestation project in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Imagine how powerful that is, where our day-to-day lives are actually working to save the planet. And so consumerism, to an extent, can work in symbiosis with saving planet Earth, which I think is a very, very, very exciting future that we can hopefully all look forward to being a part of. But understanding the impact accurately and verifiably is the first step in that. Understand the problem and then look to address it. And I think the EU directive is the first stepping stone in that.
Thank you so much for that. And the last question that I have for you is what are your final thoughts, or what would you like to leave all of our listeners with as we close out on our conversation about greenwashing and the new EU laws for corporate sustainability heads?
Okay, so what I would like to leave with, and it's not necessary, well, and it's loosely linked to the directive, but what I would suggest from, I would implore almost that everyone starts thinking about how and what they purchase from an impact perspective now. Like, we don't need to wait for this to happen. I think you can really vote with your wallet, and don't underestimate the power of individuals to influence organizations in their road to sustainability. Yeah, have your voice heard through what you purchase. So start making thought through decisions in terms of what you buy. That's what I
Oh,
would lead with.
thank you so much. What is the best way to get in contact with you if corporations have any questions about how Alex can help them out?
Individuals, please just drop me a message on Twitter. I'm trying to get better at it. I'm pretty rubbish at social media, but Contessa is keeping me in check, and I will do more. But if you're an organization that has any interest in the carbon markets generally, or wants to learn more information about how we can support on this particular directive, please just drop me an email. It's joseph.hargreaves, how you spell my name, at thallo.io. And I'll be happy to have a conversation.
In addition, my DMs are always open. You can find me on Twitter, on Telegram, on LinkedIn, and I will make sure that the information gets to Joe or someone else on. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Joe. This has been great. I have learned so much. I will definitely like sending you pings on our Slack chat for more information about this, about carbon markets, about everything. Just to be in a room where I can learn from you is such a privilege. And I'm definitely take advantage of it. So thank you for being our guest. Thank you for being so open and honest. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with. I appreciate it so much.
The pleasure is all mine as ever. The hostess with the mostess. I really appreciate you having me on to my first Twitter space. So
Yeah,
hopefully many more.
absolutely many more. And so you said I will definitely take you up on that. Thank you again. Thank you everyone for listening. Again, if you have any questions, you can always find us on our website at that.io. Have an amazing week and we'll catch you next time. Goodbye
Thanks,
now.
Contessa. Bye now.
Bye.